So you're probably wondering what the Yeerks have been up to these past 2 years. Well, meet our third narrator, the Yeerk Esplin9466, though you know him as the future Visor 3. Yes, Visor 3 takes the reins for the only time in the entire series. Now this is supposed to be a story being told by Jarrah Hammy, and while it'll make sense how he knows Dak Hammy and Aldrea's parts in the story, you might be wondering how he knows anything about Esplin's thoughts and motivations. Well, the answer is simple. I don't know. Okay, there's one part later on that people say could explain how Aldrea might know this stuff, but it's pretty flimsy. I'll get to that when I get to that. But anyway, what have the Yeerks been doing the past 2 years? Well, first they did the first thing people do when they've stolen something valuable, go to a pawn shop. And in space, the shadiest pawn shop around are the Skritna. But other than establishing contacts with the space version of bootleg Rolex salesmen, all they've really been doing is just kind of floating around, catching any ship that crosses their paths, and trying to acquire whatever happens to be inside. So by the end of 2 years, their 6 ships are like, wow, almost 9 ships! Well, with all that action going on, Esplin spends most of his time wiki surfing. See, Yeerks have this kind of USB port thing and can connect with Andalite computers, go figure. Esplin decides that he'll need to become an expert on something in hopes that it'll become important later, and by extension make him important later, and by extension allow him a host body, as there simply aren't enough to go around. We get to see Esplin experience the sensation of sight for the first time when he's allowed to rent a Geed for a little while, and it's very in line with what Aftran described in number 19, The Departure. So Esplin decides to be the Yeerk's leading Andalite expert, going over every bit of data on the species he can find. He pretty much falls in love with them, and he's determined to get an Andalite host for himself. Esplin is very different from the character he'll become. As they say, even Hitler was a cute baby, and Esplin is very youthful, very naive, and far less uptight than the Visor 3 we'll all come to know and love. He also seems, well, smart. He has a goal, and he's doing the work to reach that goal. Despite being members of 3 different species and being on 3 different sides of this conflict, Aldrea, Dak Hammy, and Esplin all follow very parallel personal narratives. All 3 of them feel ostracized because of their genetics, all 3 of them aim for a goal that seems beyond them, and all 3 of them greedily absorb anything that can help them achieve that goal. Aldrea is the daughter of the disgraced Zero, wishes to be a warrior despite her gender, and will see her rise to this role when the time comes. Dak Hammy is a seer, seen as freakish by his own people, and learns as much as he can to be the best seer that he can be. Esplin feels like being a blind Yeerk is a disadvantage, yearns for a host body despite being one of thousands of anonymous Yeerks, and studies in a field of his choice as a means to escape it. Aldrea decides to mess around in the trunks with Dak Hammy by acquiring and morphing a little creature called a Chadu. Morphing technology is very new stuff, but not hardly anyone is using it now. However, Aldrea's got a friend of a friend, and has been secretly using morphing powers for a while. The 2 of them explore the treetops for a little bit, and we get a proper Hork-Bajir point of view, so that we can see the world that they'll eventually lose.
"This is a tribe tree,"
Dak said.
"the tree of my people. This is where the elders meet."
I peered at the tree and could see here and there platforms hundreds, thousands of feet up. There were Hork-Bajir there, milling around. The more I looked, the more platforms I saw, and the more elaborate they were. Up and up, far over our heads, the platforms twined around the tribe tree. There were hundreds of Hork-Bajir in the tree, not stripping the bark, but stacking bark carried in by a steady stream of Hork-Bajir. We climbed forever. We climbed till I could not imagine that there was still more tree above us. We passed platforms where Hork-Bajir ground up bark, where they cut bark into strips, where they tied bundles of bark with string vines. And there were other platforms where Hork-Bajir simply sat around and seemed to be telling stories. Almost like classrooms, I realized. Okie dokie, we'll put the Hork-Bajir Chronicles on the list of things James Cameron ripped off for Avatar. Oh, wait, it's already on the list, because everything is on the list. Sorry, I'm kind of derailing the review here. Going back to the Yeerks, who are both the villains and the underdogs in this story, they've finally discovered the Hork-Bajir homeworld and have abducted one. They want to know if it'd be good enough in a fist fight with an Andalite, so they give their resident Andalite expert Esplin a test run. Esplin loves this new body, and the Yeerks decide to make the Hork-Bajir their first conquest. Word gets around the various Yeerk tribes of the kidnapping, and when Aldrea gets a description of the creatures who took him, she realizes the Yeerks have arrived. She rushes back to her home to warn her family, but the Yeerks pick up the signals coming from the Andalite camp, and before Aldrea can reach them, the Yeerks blow the entire camp to hell. Zero. Killed by the same Yeerks he attempted to educate. Killed by the same ships those Yeerks stole, that saw his fall from grace. Dak grabbed me and turned me away from the awful scene. He took my head gently in his two claw hands and made me face him. But as a Hork-Bajir, he didn't understand. My stalk eyes could all too easily stay riveted on the glowing red wound that had been my life.
As you say, Adrea, this is why I was born a seer, to save my people from these Yeerks who have done this evil thing. But I cannot do it alone. You must help me.
Help? I sobbed. Help what?
Help me to understand this evil,
Dak said.
Will you help me understand this evil?
I was sick. So sick with fear and hatred I wanted to die, just to make the sickness stop. But Dak had shown me a way to live, a reason to endure the violence eating away at my insides. No, I won't help you to understand, I said, but I will help you kill the Yeerks. That I will do. I will help you kill them, and kill them, and kill them, and kill them all! I screamed in powerless rage at the sky where I knew the Yeerks were hiding. Kill them all! I cried. Kill them all! Esplin had been part of the party who blew up the Andalite camp, and was ignored when he said they should wait till all 4 Andalites were together to blow them up. And since they didn't do that, they have to land the fighter and clean up the mess personally. This might be showing how Visor 3 gained his intolerance towards people who don't follow his orders to a T, because if his fellow Yeerks had just listened to him, then nothing that follows would have happened. A lot more Yeerks would have survived, and they would have 100% of the planet before the Andalites showed up. And, I'm not entirely sure I buy that. Maybe if Esplin reflected on this a bit more throughout the book. But one problem with this decision to wait for Aldrea to return to the camp, well, quite frankly, it's easily one of Visor 3's top 5 most reasonable and intelligent ideas. It's leaps and bounds beyond pretend to be monsters in theme park House of Horrors or hit important government guy with car and hope he doesn't die. So the Yeerk fighter drops off Esplin and a few other Hork-Bajir controllers, and they give chase after Aldrea and Dak Hammy. Now, prior to these events, no Hork-Bajir has ever experienced violence, so Dak Hammy is damn confused when a supposed fellow Hork-Bajir starts attacking him.
Now both Hork-Bajir turned to Adrea. They moved closer, slashing mildly at air, drawing closer all the time. They circled, forcing her back against the tree trunk. If they kept slashing and moving toward her in that way, she would be cut. She would be cut so badly that she might die. I had seen Hork-Bajir who had been accidentally cut. Once an old, weak Hork-Bajir died from the cut. Ow! No. I'm not doing too many Dak Hammy narrations in this review. Anyway, well, that must have been one really weak Hork-Bajir and one really impressive cut. Seeing as how we've seen Hork-Bajir split their own skulls open with their fingers and completely heal in a matter of minutes. Finally, the concept of violence sinks in, and Dak Hammy severs the spine of Esplin's Hork-Bajir host, and he and Aldrea make a run for it to the Blue Mist, the only possible hiding place on the entire planet. The Yeerks pursue, but shit goes down when one of the mist monsters, the Jubba Jubba, which would be a great name for a bubblegum, attacks, and Aldrea and Dak Hammy manage to escape beyond the mist, where no Hork-Bajir
has ever been. Well, there are rocks, and some rocks, and a few rocks, and more rocks.
Oh, look! Rocks!
Yeah, not the most scenic alien landscapes ever, but after hours of walking, the two of them finally come upon a chasm. The wall of the chasm was covered with amazing, intricate filigree. Windows, doors, walkways, arches, open spaces cut back into the cliff, all connected vertically by stone stairways. Thousands of feet below all this incredible construction, maybe tens of thousands of feet, was the valley floor. It was not as bright as the sun, but it was bright enough to cast shadows upward from every stair and arch and windowsill. It glowed red and yellow, and seemed to seethe with slow, sluggish movement. We were looking at the molten heart of the planet. I don't know much, but I'd imagine that if you walk down a gradual slope for several hours, find a chasm, look down, and see the core of the planet, then the planet you're on is so small that the gravity should be somewhere in the ballpark of none at all. At the very least, Aldrea should be able to fly around like Superman. Anyway, so they find a city built into the cliff face, seemingly deserted. After exploring it for a little bit, they decide they're safe enough to take a nap. Dak slept as Hork-Bajir do. He relaxed his legs and slumped down into sort of a seating position, with legs splayed out in front and thick tail providing a third support. His head fell forward, chin to chest. He was asleep almost instantly, as far as I could tell. I was jealous. Sleep isn't always that easy for me. For most Andalites, we are a watchful species. My mother explained it to me once when I found myself unable to sleep for several days. We no longer have predators to attack us, she said, but evolution does not just throw away adaptations that were necessary once. The animals we evolved from were prey for millions of years. They lived in vast herds, always watched by hungry predators. This was before we developed our tail blades and we had no protection but speed. We still feel the need to watch for predators. It may be a million years before we lose that instinct. I guess the Elamists couldn't shag it out of them. A few hours later, the denizens of the cliff finally show up. Intelligent, crystal-eyed flying squirrels who identify themselves as the Arn. They simply show up and ignore them for a while, and then tell the two of them to fuck off when they start asking questions.
We are the Narn, the creature said. I am named Quetzalcoatl.
Oh, I know this one. You make him say his name backwards, and he goes back to his own dimension. Eventually, Quatz realizes that it's probably best to do whatever the two aliens with razor blades growing out of their bodies tell him to do, so he takes them to a lab and gives them a PowerPoint presentation. Millions of years ago, the Arn learned that an asteroid was destined to hit their planet and kill everything on it. My guess, the Nest were still pissed about the Animorphs breaking their wall, so they kept launching asteroids into random planets. Incapable of interstellar spaceflight, the Arn opted instead to go into suspended animation on a moon and wait to see if the planet ever got better. The Arn woke up to find valleys in the planet that could sustain an atmosphere, but would require heavy maintenance from, say, special trees. The Arn may be shitty physicists, but they are damn good genetic engineers, so they whipped up some air-giving trees in a jiffy. But the Arn are also assholes who don't want to bother maintaining them, so they whipped up another genetic shortcut. The Hork-Bajir. Yes, Dak, I said. This is your creator. Dak looked at the Arn in shock, but he didn't fall to his knees or tremble in awe. He was surprised, not impressed.